Hello, my name is Daniel Lee, and I teach adult education at Arkansas State University in Newport. And today I wanted to continue our social studies video series with American immigration. Now, one of the first things I like to do is give you some kind of time frame. So let's look at this line graph here that shows American population growth from 1790 all the way to 2000. So the time frame we're going to be looking at really begins around 1840, 1850 and goes all the way to about 1920 right here. So one thing I want you to notice is 1790 to 1850, this 60-year period, we go from about 4 or 5 million Americans to about 20 million. So that is a significant increase during this 60-year period. But if we look at the next 60-year period from 1850 to 1910, we go from 20 million people to about 100 million people. So what is driving this? So what causes this population growth in this 60-year period that we don't see in this 60-year period? Well, the answer to that is immigration and immigrants. So this is a bar graph, and if you notice where we're looking at about 1840, 1850, we see that growth that we just looked at from about I'd say about 25,000 immigrants to you're pushing 2.5 million immigrants here. But nothing like we're going to see from 1850 to 1910. So yes, there are immigrants coming in the early 1800s, but nothing like we're going to see in the second half of the 1800s and the first couple decades of the 1900s. And you can see these numbers, just tens of millions of immigrants. This is going to be the first wave that we see, and then the Great Depression and World War II really drives down immigration. But ever since the end of World War II, we have been seeing a consistent growth in American immigration. And as you see, to the point where it surpassed what we saw in the 19-teens and 1920s. So really, the time frame that we're looking at is 1850 to 1920. What caused this right here? This is a great map that shows this immigration and settlement from 1820 to 1860. And keep in mind that these numbers will only increase after 1860. You can see the breakdown of ethnicity of who's coming, mostly Irish and German. Later on, it'll be Polish, Italians. But the first wave is definitely mostly Irish and German. You can see this bar graph that shows the immigrants from 1820 to 1850. And as you see, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Wisconsin, Minnesota, you're going to see 20% or more of the population as immigrants. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you were an immigrant coming from Europe and you had some kind of skill, if you were a carpenter or if you had some money, you had a lot more options. Most of these immigrants with skills, most of them would go west. And that's how come you see Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois will also become destinations for immigrants. Now, if you were the typical European immigrant who was just really had no specialized skill, you usually found the first factory to work in or the first apartment to live in, and that's where you went. So we see a lot of immigrants here on the East Coast, but keep in mind the reason that we see it back here is if you had money or if you had some kind of skill or you had the opportunity, you went out west. And if you watched our Manifest Destiny video, you would understand why. Here's a breakdown. You can see for the first part, it's mostly North and West Europe and South and East Europe. Now it's mostly Latin America and Asia. That's where we see this. Now that was the first part of our video. The second part, we're going to talk about the immigrants and get a lot more in depth of why they're coming.